Hanu stood at the back of the Galactic Council chamber and tried not to show his nerves. The room was enormous, built to hold representatives from 40 different species. Most of them were taller than humans, stronger than humans, or both. The ceiling stretched so high above that Earth's architects would have called it wasteful, but then again, Earth didn't have representatives who needed 30 ft of vertical space. Council members sat in a massive circle, each on a platform that suited their biology. Some breed methane, others needed water tanks. A few existed as energy patterns contained in crystalline structures. Henu was just a man in a suit standing on solid ground, breathing normal air in his designated section. He had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years. Now, in that time, he'd learned that most species in the galaxy viewed humanity with something between pity and contempt. Humans were weak, they said. Soft, too emotional, too divided. The fact that humanity had only recently developed faster than light travel made them children in galactic terms. Today's session would test just how much the Council underestimated his species. The Talvar representative rose from his platform. His name was something Hyansu couldn't pronounce properly, so he thought of him as the general. The Talvar looked vaguely reptilian, standing on 2 powerful legs with 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. Their species had conquered 17 worlds. They were the Council's primary military force. The matter before us is simple, the general said, his translator device rendering his hissing speech into flat, emotionless words. The Talvar Empire requires the resources of the human moon colonies. We have calculated fair compensation. The humans will accept, or the matter will be resolved through other means. Several council members nodded. A few made sound that the translators interpreted as agreement. Hyansu felt his jaw tighten. Fair compensation. They were demanding Earth's lunar helium-3 mining operations, the fusion reactors on Europa, and the rare earth extraction facilities on Titan. In exchange, they offered manufactured goods that Earth could make itself, just slower. It wasn't negotiation. It was theft dressed in diplomatic language. Ambassador Hyansu, the Council speaker, said, "Does humanity accept these terms?" Hyansu activated his communication device. He wasn't important enough to speak for all of Earth's military, but he could relay their response. He received it 10 minutes ago, before the session began. No, Hyansu said simply. The chamber fell silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then the general laughed. It was a terrible sound, like rocks scraping against metal. "Perhaps the humans do not understand," the general said. "This is not a request between equals. The Talvar have 600 warships. Humanity has mining vessels with welded-on weapons. You have no military tradition, no warrior culture. Your people argue among yourselves about everything. You cannot even agree on how to govern a single planet." Other council members joined in with their own observations. Humanity was too young, too fractured, too weak. One representative, whose species resembled a floating jellyfish, noted that humans had only stopped fighting each other 20 years ago, when first contact forced them to unite. Hyansu let them talk. He'd heard it all before. Some of it was even true. Humanity was divided. They did argue. Before the aliens arrived, Earth had been 3 years away from a nuclear war between continental coalitions, but they Aliens didn't understand what that meant, Council Speaker Hyansu said when the chamber quieted. May I present Captain Dezhou of the Earth Defense Fleet. A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a man in a dark uniform standing on the bridge of a ship. Dezhou was 42 years old, with gray streaks in his black hair and a scar across his left cheek from a mining accident in his youth. He looked tired. He looked like someone who'd been working 20-hour days for months. He looked absolutely calm. Honorable Council, Dezhou said, his image nodding with perfect politeness. I speak for Earth's defense forces. We respectfully decline the Talver demands you decline. The generals translu imagined it was amused. Captain, your species cannot stand against the Talver military. We have conquered worlds with armies 10 times your size. That may be true, Dezhou said. His voice was steady, measured, but those worlds surrendered when they realized they couldn't win. Humans don't think that way. You would fight a war you cannot win. We would fight a war where we make victory cost more than you're willing to pay. The general made a sound that might have been laughter or anger, bold words from a species that builds warships from mining equipment. Yes, Dezhou agreed. We do repurpose our civilian craft. That's true. We don't have centuries of military tradition like the Talver. We've been in space for less than 50 years. He paused and something changed in his expression. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something colder. But we've been fighting each other for 50,000 years. We know 1,500 ways to kill someone with our bare hands. We've poisoned water supplies, burned entire cities, and fought wars that lasted for generations. We invented weapons so terrible that we banned ourselves from using them. We created diseases as weapons, then created worse diseases by accident. We split the atom and immediately thought to make it a bomb. The chamber was very quiet now. We are very, very good at war, Dezhou continued. We just never had anyone else to fight before. So yes, General, our ships are made from mining equipment. Our tactics are experimental. Our fleet is small. But if you come for our colonies, we will fight you with everything we have. And I promise you this, you will win eventually, but you'll lose so many ships, so many soldiers that every other species in the council will see the Talver bleed. Dezhou leaned forward slightly, and they'll wonder if maybe they should test you next. The hologram ended. Hansen, who stood in the sudden silence watching the council process what they'd heard, some representatives were whispering to each other, others sat perfectly still, which their species apparently did when thinking hard. The general's clawed hands clenched and unclenched. The human captain threatens the Talver Empire. No, Hyansu said quietly. He's explaining what will happen. There's a difference. The council speaker raised one of its appendages, calling for order. This session is adjourned. The council will consider the matter and vote on potential resolutions. As the chamber emptied, the general approached Hyansu. Up close, the tower was massive, easily 8 ft tall, with muscles that could crush steel. Your captain is foolish, the general said. He speaks of making us pay a price, but humans will pay everything. Your colonies will burn. Your people will die. For what pride? Hyansu met the general's eyes. In that moment he felt something he'd never felt before as a diplomat. Not fear, not anger, just a cold certainty about what was coming. Not pride, Hyansu said. Principal, we decide what's ours, not you, not the council us. The general turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy on the metal floor. Hyacinth Sue sent message back to Earth, they're coming. The response came immediately from Captain DeJoe. The good were ready, and standing there in the empty council chamber, Hyacinth believed him. He'd read the defense plans, he'd seen what Earth's engineers had built in secret. The galaxy thought humanity was weak. They were about to learn different. Commander Jai Wu checked her tactical display for the 100th time in the last hour. The screen showed 53 red dots moving through space toward the human colonies, 53 Talver warships, each one 3 times the size of her vessel. She sat in the command chair of the destroyer Dancing Blade, one of 22 ships in the Earth Defense Fleet around her. The bridge crew worked quietly, their faces lit by the glow of their screens. Nobody spoke unless they had something important to say. They'd trained for this moment for months, but training was different from reality. Distance to enemy fleet, Zhu asked. 2 million kilometers enclosing her sensor. Officer Taeying replied, they're maintaining formation, speed holding steady. Wu nodded. The Talver were being cautious, which was smart. They knew the humans had some kind of defense plan. What they didn't know was what that plan actually was. All ships. This is Commander Jai Wu, she said into the fleet channel. Remember the drill. Nobody fires until I give the word. Nobody breaks formation until I give the word. We stick to the plan. 21 captains acknowledged her order. She could hear the tension in their voices. Most of them were former merchant captains or mining ship commanders. Only 3 had any military experience, and that was from Earth's old wars. None of them had fought in space before, but then again, neither had the Talver fought humans before. Commander Taeying said, they're launching attack craft. Count is 180 fighters. They're moving ahead of the main fleet. Who smiled, though there was no humor in it. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted on the Talver flagship. The general stood before his tactical display and felt satisfied. The human ships were arranged in a defensive formation around their colony stations. It was a predictable response from an inexperienced military. They would try to hold position and protect their civilians. It would fail. Of course, the Talver had fought this kind of battle dozens of times. You sent fighters to force the defenders to break formation, then you brought in the heavy ships to crush them piece by piece. All wings, begin your attack. The general ordered. 180 fighters screamed toward the human fleet. Talver warriors were the best pilots in the galaxy. Each one had trained for years. They flew ships that could turn faster, shoot farther, and survive more damage than anything humanity had built. The human ships opened fire at extreme range. It was a waste of ammunition. The general thought defensive lasers couldn't hit fast-moving fighters at that distance. Every military force in the galaxy knew that, but then the first fighter exploded, then 3 more, than a dozen. Report, the general shouted. Sir, the humans are using predictive firing. Their computers are calculating our flight paths and shooting where we're going to be, not where we are. The general felt a moment of surprise. That was clever, difficult to program, requiring enormous computing power, but clever still. The humans only had 22 ships. They couldn't stop all the fighters, except they weren't trying to. stop all the fighters. They were just trying to make the fighters pay a price for getting close. By the time the surviving Talvar fighters reached weapons range, 58 of them were gone. Remaining pilots were angry now, eager for revenge. They dove at the human ships, firing everything they had. The human ships scattered, not in panic but in a coordinated pattern, each vessel moving in a different direction. The defensive formation broke apart like a flower opening its petals. There, running, one of the Talvar officers shouted, "All ships pursue." The general ordered, "Don't let them regroup." The Talvar warships accelerated, spreading out to chase the fleeing human vessels. This was the decisive moment. Catch the human ships before they could jump away, destroy them, and the war would be over. DG Wu watched her tactical display as the Talvar fleet spread out exactly as planned. The enemy ships were following individual human vessels, now breaking their formation to maximize their hunting efficiency. "All ships report position," she said calmly. One by one, her captains confirmed they'd reached their assigned coordinates. Each human ship was now inside the asteroid field that surrounded the colonies. It was a dense field full of rocks ranging from car-sized to mountain-sized. Navigation was tricky. Sensors had trouble distinguishing between rocks and ships. It was the perfect place for an ambush. "Taeyang, give me fleet-wide channel." "You said channel open." "Commander, all ships execute Phase 2. Light them up throughout the asteroid field." Human ships that had been hiding behind rocks, their systems shut down to avoid detection, suddenly powered up. Talvar had been chasing 22 human vessels. There were actually 48. Extra ships weren't military vessels. They were mining ships, cargo haulers, even a few passenger transports, but each one had been modified with weapons. More importantly, each one had been loaded with mining charges. The mining charges were simple devices used to split asteroids apart for easier processing. They weren't designed as weapons, but explosives didn't care what they were designed for. Human ships that had been fleeing suddenly reverse course, burning their engines at full power back toward their pursuers. The Talvar warships, confused by the sudden change, tried to adjust. Some attempted to fire, others tried to evade. And the asteroid started exploding. Mining charges planted days ago on dozens of rocks throughout the field detonated. A carefully timed sequence. Massive chunks of stone and metal flew in every direction. Talvar ships designed to fight in open space found themselves dodging debris at lethal speeds. 3 warships died immediately, torn apart by impacts. 5 more suffered critical damage, their hulls breached, their engines failing. The survivors tried to retreat, to pull back to open space where they could regroup. That's when the human ships attacked for real. Jiwoo's dancing blade came around a rotating asteroid and found herself 200 m from a Talvar cruiser. At this range, even human weapons couldn't miss. She fired everything, her rail guns punching holes through the enemy ship's armor, her missiles striking the already damaged sections all across the asteroid field. Similar battles erupted. Human ships, smaller and faster, used the rocks for cover. They'd pop out, fire, and disappear again before the Talvar could respond. When the enemy tried to pursue, they'd find themselves in the firing line of 2 or 3 other human vessels. Doan was calling out targets. his voice steady despite the chaos. Cruiser at bearing 270. She's damaged. Fighter wing coming from above. 10. Contacts. Destroyer braking right. She's targeting us. Cushyer was hands. Moved across her controls, steering the ship through the deadly maze of rock and fire. A Talvar missile streak close enough that she could see it through the viewport. She pulled the dancing blade into a spin using an asteroid's gravity to sling herself around, coming up behind the ship that had fired at her. Full volley, she ordered. Her weapons. Officer Beau Ra didn't hesitate. The dancing blades rail guns fired in rapid succession, each shot hitting the Talvar destroyer's engines. The enemy ship went dark, tumbling through space, dead. Commander, we're getting reports from the fleet, Taeyang said. Captain Sunman on the Iron Fist is reporting 2 kills. Captain Myra on the Swift Current has disabled a cruiser. Casualties are 3. Ships damaged, 1 destroyed. Wu felt her chest tighten at that last part. 1 ship destroyed meant 20 people dead. People she knew, but she couldn't think about that now. What's the status of the Talvar fleet? They're retreating. Commander, pulling back to open space. Current count shows 34 ships still functional. We estimate 19 destroyed or disabled. 19. The humans had destroyed 19 Talvar warships with mining equipment and clever planning. They'd killed almost a third of the enemy fleet. All ships do not pursue. Gu ordered. Reform defensive positions. Get our damaged ships back to the stations for repair. And someone find survivors from the Morning Star. As the battle ended, Jiu allowed herself to take a full breath. They'd won. Not by being stronger, not by having better ships, but by being smarter, by fighting in a way the Talvar didn't expect on the Talvar flagship. The general stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 19 ships. He'd lost 19 ships to a species that supposedly had no real military. Sir, should we regroup and attack again? His second-in-command asked. The general's claws dug into his command chair. Every instinct told him to refuse to fight back immediately, but he forced himself to think tactically. His fleet was damaged. His warriors were shaken. The humans had proven they could fight. No, he said. Finally, we pull back to the council station. We report what happened and we return with the full fleet. As the Talvar ships jumped away, the general made himself a promise. The humans would pay for this, not just in ships but in colonies and lives. He would show them what happened when you defied the Talvar Empire. But in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered a question he didn't want to answer. What if they have more tricks? Lieutenant Yuna pressed herself against the concrete wall and listened to the sound of boots in the corridor outside. Heavy boots, Talvar warriors moving in formation, sweeping the building floor by floor. She was on Colony Station. Kepler 7, a moon base that housed 12,000 humans. The station was built into the moon's surface, a network of tunnels and chambers carved from rock and reinforced with steel and concrete. It was supposed to be a mining operation. Now it was a battlefield. Yuna checked her rifle. 30 rounds remaining. She had 2 grenades left and a knife that had belonged to her grandfather during Earth's last war. Not much to fight with, but it would have to be enough. Lieutenant, a voice whispered from behind her. It was Private Quan, barely 20 years old, his face covered in dust and blood. There. On this level, what do we do, you know? Looked at the kid. Quan had been a Mining technician 2 months ago. Then they. Talver invaded, and every human on Kepler 7 who could hold a weapon became a soldier. They'd had 3 weeks of basic training. Not enough, not nearly enough. We do what we've been doing, Yuna said. Quietly, we make them bleed for every meter. 5 days ago, the Talver fleet had arrived in orbit, 60 warships carrying 5,000 ground troops. They broadcast a simple message: surrender the station or be destroyed. High Command had responded with an offer to evacuate civilians. The Talver had agreed. Transport ships had taken away the children, the elderly, the ones who couldn't fight. That left about 9,000 people. Most of them weren't soldiers. They fought anyway. When Yuna asked why they were staying, a mining engineer named Jae-hyun had put it simply, this is our home. If we run now, they'll just follow us to the next place. Better to fight here. So they fought. The Talver had landed there. Troops 3 days ago, expecting quick victory. Instead, they found a nightmare. Every building was fortified. Every corridor had firing positions. Every intersection was a killing zone. The humans had turned their colony into a fortress, and they fought with a fury that the Talver had never seen before. The sound of boots got closer. Yuna held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. On 0, she and Quan rolled around the corner, weapons raised. The corridor was empty. Where did they? Quan started to say that the ceiling exploded above them. 3 Talver warriors dropped down, having crawled through the maintenance ducts. It was a smart move. Yuna had to respect that, even as she was already firing. Her first burst caught one warrior in the chest. Talver armor was tough, but human rifles fired heavy rounds designed to punch through mining equipment. The warrior went down, purple blood spraying from the wounds. The second warrior swung at Shran with one of its forearms. The kid was too slow. The blow sent him flying into the wall, his helmet cracking. He slumped down, unconscious or dead. Yuna didn't have time to check. The third warrior was raising its weapon, an energy rifle that could cut through steel. She did the only thing she could think of. She charged. The warrior fired, but Yuna had already closed the distance, too close for it to aim properly. The energy beam scored across her shoulder, burning through her armor, and the pain was incredible, but she ignored it. She'd learned to ignore pain. She jammed her rifle barrel under the warrior's chin where the armor was weakest and pulled the trigger. Talvera's head snapped back and it fell. The second warrior was getting up, reaching for its weapon. Yuna shot it twice more, then twice again. Then she kept shooting until her rifle clicked empty. She stood there breathing hard, her shoulder on fire with pain. Quan was moving, groaning. Alive then? Good. Can you walk? She asked, her voice rough. Think so, Quan mumbled, touching his cracked helmet. What now? Now we fall back to Section 7 and regroup. They helped each other through the tunnels, past walls scorched by energy weapons, past bodies of both humans and Talver. The station looked like it had been hit by a bomb. In some places it had been. Section 7 was a large chamber that had once been a cafeteria. Now it was a field hospital and command post. Combined, about 200 humans were there. Some wounded, some just exhausted. Yuna saw Sergeant Kiwan, who'd been a cargo pilot before the war. He had a bandage around his head and was directing ammunition distribution. Lieutenant Kiwan said when he saw her, "Heard you held Sector 12. Good work. We did Hold it, Yuna said, accepting water. From a medic, we just made them pay to. Take it, that was the strategy, don't. Try to hold positions you couldn't. Defend, instead make the enemy fight. For every meter, then fall back and make them fight again, every building they took cost them warriors, every corridor was a battle, every room was a trap. The tower were winning, but slowly, painfully slowly, a man approached. Older than most, with gray hair and tired eyes, Dr. Hansel, who'd been treating wounded for 3 days straight. Lieutenant, we've lost sections 8 through 15, the Talvar are pushing toward the main reactor. If they take that, we lose life support. How many fighters do we have left? Yuna asked. Maybe 300 who can still hold a weapon. Another 100 who could if we're desperate. 300. It started with 9,000. The number hit Yuna like a punch to the gut, but she didn't let it show on her face. Can't show weakness, can't give up. Then we make our stand at the reactor, she said. Set up overlapping fields of fire, plant whatever explosives we have left in the approach tunnels. If we can't hold it, we blow it. Dr. Hansel looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. If you blow the reactor, you'll kill everyone in the station, including us. I know. He nodded slowly. I'll tell the others. That night, if you could call it night, in a place where the lights never changed, Yuna sat with her back against the wall and tried to remember what peace felt like. It had only been 3 days, but it seemed like years since she'd slept in a real bed, eaten a real meal, done anything normal. Juan sat beside her, holding his rifle like it was the only solid thing in the universe. Lieutenant, can I ask you something? Sure, kid. Why are we doing this? High Command offered evacuation. We could have left. Yuna looked at the young man. He was scared. They all were. But he was still here, still fighting. You know Earth's history? She asked. Before we met the aliens, some we had. Lots of wars. Yeah, terrible wars. Wars where entire cities burned. Wars. Millions died. And you know what people always asked afterward? They asked, how could we do that to each other? Yuna paused, checking her rifle for the dozenth time. But we're not fighting each other now. We're fighting for each other. Every minute we hold this station, we're giving the fleet time to prepare. We're showing the Talvar that humans don't surrender. We're teaching the galaxy that you don't mess with our people. She looked at Quan directly. And yeah, maybe we'll die here. Probably we'll die here, but we'll die making them remember us. We'll die making it cost so much that the next time they think about attacking humans, they'll remember this place. Quan was quiet for a moment, then he said, I'm scared. Lieutenant, me too, kid, me too. The final battle began at dawn. Not that there was a dawn in the underground base, but they all still fought in Earth time. The Talvar pushed forward with everything they had left, trying to take the reactor before the humans could destroy it. Yuna stood in the main corridor leading to the reactor chamber, behind a barricade made of mining equipment and furniture. On either side of her, humans waited with whatever weapons they had. Some had rifles. Others had mining tools that they turned into weapons. One woman held a nail gun. The Talvar came in waves. The first wave died in the kill zone, cut down by concentrated fire. The second wave brought heavy armor. They got halfway down the corridor before the humans detonated charges in the walls, bringing down tons of rock on top of them. The third wave was led by the Talvar general himself. Yuna could see him through the smoke and dust massive and terrifying, his forearms holding weapons, his armor scarred from battles. Across a dozen worlds, he pointed at the human defenders and roared something in his language, the translator on Yuna's helmet rendered it as no more running. No more tricks, you die now, not yet. Yuna whispered, she raised her voice. Everyone fire on my mark, the Talver. Charged, 50 warriors, maybe more. Running straight at the barricade, you. No, waited, let them get close, let them think they were going to win now. The humans opened fire and the corridor became a storm of bullets and explosions, but this time the tower didn't stop, they were done being careful. They came straight at the barricade, taking losses, stepping over. They're dead, determined to end this. Warrior reached the barricade, Yuna shot it. Another climbed over, Private Quan stabbed it with his knife. They kept coming. The general reached the barricade and smashed through it with his bare hands. He was magnificent and terrible, a warrior in his element. He looked at Yuna, recognition in his eyes. He'd been hunting her specifically, she realized, hunting the human commander. He raised his weapon and Yuna knew she was dead, but before he could fire, Dr. Hansel appeared from the side and shot the general 3 times with a pistol. The general roared and turned, backhanding the doctor so hard that his neck broke, but it had given Yuna time. She pulled her last grenade, activated it, and jammed it into a gap in the general's armor at his side. For Hansel, she said, and dove away. Captain DeJoe stood on the bridge of the battleship Iron Will and studied the holographic star map floating before him. Red markers showed Talver military installations, blue markers showed human territory. Between them lay hundreds of light years of empty space, all ships. Report ready, Captain, Commander Minsu said from the tactical station. The fleet is assembled and awaiting your orders. DeJoe looked at the 14 ships that made up Strike Group Alpha. They were the best humanity had: 5 destroyers, 6 cruisers, 2 battleships, and 1 carrier holding 30 fighters. It wasn't much compared to the Talver military, but it was everything Earth could spare for this mission, a mission that High Command had argued about for 3 days. Before approving, Helm set course for the Talver home system, DeJoe said. Quietly, the bridge went silent. Everyone knew the plan, but hearing it said out loud made it real. They were going to attack the Talver home world itself, not the military bases, not the colonies, the actual home system where billions of Talver civilians lived. Captain MSU said carefully, once we jump, there's no going back. The Council will call this an act of barbarism. They might even sanction Earth. I know, DeJoe said. He made peace with that decision days ago, but if we don't do this, the Talver will keep coming. They'll wear us down planet by planet, colony by colony, until there's nothing left. We need to end this war now. He turned to face his crew, young faces, most of them people who'd never expected to fight in a war. I want everyone to understand something, he said. What we're about to do will be remembered forever, maybe as a great victory, maybe as a terrible crime, but it will be remembered. Anyone who wants to object or request transfer to another ship, do it now. No judgment. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. After a moment, MSU said, we're with you, Captain. DeHo nodded. Then let's finish this war. Helm, execute, jump. The stars stretched and twisted as the fleet entered faster than light travel. For 3 days they would cross the vast distance. Between human and Talver space, 3 days. To prepare, 3 days to doubt, Djo spent. That time reviewing the plan. It was simple in concept but would require perfect execution. They would jump into the Talver home system, bypass the military stations, and appear directly above the home world. Then they would broadcast a message that would end the war one way or another. On the second day, Commander Jai Wu and LT Unk and GTS recorded. Message arrived via delayed transmission. She described the battle at Kepler 7, the casualties, the sacrifice, the way humans had fought and died to hold a single colony station. Djo watched the recording 3 times. Each time he felt the weight of command grow heavier. All those people dead for what? So that humanity could prove it. Wouldn't surrender. No, so that humanity could survive. That's what he had to remember. On the 3rd day, Lieutenant Byung Hyun from communications brought him an intercepted Talver transmission. Captain, their propaganda networks are calling us cowards. They say we used dishonorable tactics that were not real warriors. Djo almost laughed. Real warriors. They invaded our colonies with overwhelming force and got bloodied. Now we're cowards. Should I prepare a response, sir? No, let them think what they want. We'll respond with actions, not words. When the fleet emerged from faster than light travel, they found themselves exactly where they needed to be, 1 million kilometers above the Talver home world. It was a beautiful planet, blue and green with swirls of white clouds, bigger than Earth with 3 moons, home to 8 billion. Talver, the capital of an empire that had conquered 17 worlds, sir. Multiple contacts, the sensor officer shouted. Defense platforms are powering up. Count as 48 stations, each armed with heavy weapons. We're also detecting a defense fleet, 20 ships in close orbit, another 30 on approach. Are they hailing us? Djo asked. Yes, sir. They're demanding we leave immediately or be destroyed. Djo had expected nothing less. Open a channel, all frequencies. I want every Talver ship, station, and planetary receiver to hear this. Channel open, Captain. Djo took a breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. Not the fighting, not the tactics, just words. This is Captain Djo of the Earth Defense Fleet, commanding officer of Strike Group Alpha. We are here above your home world. With 14 warships, we know you have defenses. We know you have a fleet. We know you could possibly destroy us if we fought. He paused, letting that sink in. But before you attack, I want you to understand something. Look at your tactical displays. We didn't appear near your military stations. We're not attacking your fleet. We're here above your planet, where your families live, your children, your cities, on the Talver flagship defending the planet. Admiral Kelter stared at his display in disbelief. The humans had bypassed every defensive position and jumped directly to the home world. It was a move so audacious, so insane that no sane military would attempt it unless they were desperate or unless they had a plan. Should we engage, Admiral? His weapons officer asked. Wait, Kelter said. Something about this felt wrong. The humans had proven themselves cunning. This wasn't a simple attack. Let's hear what they have to say. Dade continued his broadcast. Your empire made a mistake. You thought humanity was weak because we're new to space. You thought we would surrender our colonies because we lack military tradition. You were wrong. On the planet below, Billions of Talver watched their screens. As the human captain spoke, in the council chamber light years away, representatives received the broadcast. With shock in the human colonies, exhausted defenders listened and hoped. We fought you at the asteroid field. Djo said, we made you pay in ships. We fought you at Kepler 7. We made you pay in warriors. At every step we showed you that humans don't surrender. We don't retreat. We fight until we win or until we die. His voice grew harder, and now we're here above your home world to show you something else. We could destroy you. Right now we have weapons that could crack your planet's crust. We have missiles that could burn your atmosphere. We have bombs that would turn your cities to glass on the planet. Panic began to spread. Millions of Talver looked at the sky knowing that death hung above them, but we won't do that, Djo said. His voice softened slightly, because we're not conquerors. We're not monsters. We're humans, and we believe that war should end when the fighting stops, not when everyone is dead. Admiral Kelter felt something he hadn't felt in his long military career. Respect for an enemy. So here is our offer, Djo continued. Your empire will withdraw all forces from human space. Immediately, you will not attack our colonies again. You will not demand tribute. In exchange, we leave your home world untouched. We turn around and go home. He paused again. But if you refuse, if you attack us now, then we will fight, and you need to understand what that means. It doesn't mean we'll have a glorious space battle that you'll probably win. It means we'll launch everything we have at your planet before you can destroy us. It means millions of your people will die, maybe billions. Djo leaned forward, his face filling the screen. And here's the thing you need to really understand. We're willing to do it, not because we want to, not because we enjoy killing, but because if we let you win, you'll keep coming. You'll destroy more of our colonies. You'll kill more of our people. So we'll do whatever it takes to stop you, even if it means becoming the monsters you think we are. The transmission ended. Djo sat back in his command chair and waited. On the Talver flagship, Admiral Kelter stared at his display. He was a warrior. He'd fought in 20 campaigns. He'd never surrendered, never retreated, but he was also a father somewhere on the planet below. His family lived in the capital city. His mate, his children, millions of other families living their lives, unaware that their fate hung on his next decision. Admiral, his weapons officer, asked, do we engage? Seater thought about the humans' tactics so far, the ambush in the asteroid field, the defense of Kepler 7 where they fought to the last breath. These weren't people who made empty threats. If he attacked, though, humans would launch everything they had at the planet. Maybe his fleet would destroy them. Probably they would, but not before the humans inflicted catastrophic damage. Was victory worth millions of civilian deaths? No, Croter said finally. We do not engage. Open a channel to the human fleet. When the channel opened, Kelter could see the human captain. He looked tired, stressed, but also determined. Captain Djo Ho, Kelter said, his translator rendering his words into human language. I am Admiral Kelter. I command this fleet. Admiral, you have placed us in an impossible position. Attack you and you destroy our world. Let you leave and we show weakness. Yes, Djo said. Simply, why not simply destroy us and be done with it? Why give us a choice? Djo was quiet for a moment. Because we're Not fighting to destroy you, Admiral. We're fighting to survive if you leave. Us alone, we have no reason to kill your people. Kelter considered this. In his culture, enemies were either conquered or destroyed. The idea of winning a war and then offering mercy was almost incomprehensible, but perhaps that was the point. Perhaps that was what made humans dangerous. I will recommend to my government that we accept your terms, Croter said, but I want you to know something, Captain. Counselor Vesk floated in his containment sphere, looking at the young delegates who had gathered to hear his story. They were from species that had joined the Galactic Council after the human war. They knew humanity as a trading partner, sometimes as a friend. They had no idea what humans were truly capable of. That was dangerous. So Vesk, who was old even by his species' long lifespan, had decided to tell them the truth. I was there, Vesk said, his translated voice echoing in the chamber when the Talvar invaded human space, when humanity fought back, when the galaxy learned to fear them. A young delegate from the Krello species raised a tentacle. Fear, but humans are peaceful. They trade fairly. They help with disaster relief. Yes, Vesk agreed. They do all those things now. But you must understand what they were like during the war, what they're still capable of being. He activated the holographic display showing the battle at the asteroid field. The Talvar thought they would win easily. They had more ships, better weapons, centuries of military experience, but the humans won. Anyway, do you know why? The young delegates shook their heads or made whatever gesture their species used for uncertainty. Because humans don't fight fair, Vesk said. They fight to win. They used mining charges as weapons. They hid ships among asteroids. They sacrificed damaged vessels as decoys. Every tactic that the Talvar considered dishonorable, humans used without hesitation. Another delegate, this one from a species that resembled a crystal formation, asked, but surely that's just clever tactics. It was, Vesk said, but it was also a warning. Humans were telling us that they didn't care about our rules for warfare. They cared about survival. He changed the holographic display to show Kepler 7. Then came the ground battle. The Talvar landed 5,000 of their best warriors on a single colony. They expected quick surrender. Instead, humans fought them for 3 days in tunnel warfare. Do you know how tunnel warfare works? The young delegates didn't answer. It's brutal. Vesk continued. Close quarters, no room for tactics, just killing and dying in dark corridors. The Talvar are natural warriors, stronger than humans, faster than humans. They should have won in hours, but they didn't. A delegate guessed no, because humans turned their entire colony into a weapon. They collapsed tunnels on enemy troops. They booby-trapped their own buildings. They fought with mining tools when they ran out of guns, and when they were finally losing, when the Talvar had almost won, the human commander prepared to destroy their own reactor, which would have killed everyone on the station, including all the humans. The chamber was very quiet now. That's when I began to understand, Vesk said. Humans were willing to die rather than lose. Not just soldiers, everyone. They evacuated children and the elderly, but everyone else stayed and fought. Civilians became warriors. Scientists became soldiers. They all chose death over surrender. He changed the display again, showing the human fleet above the Talvar home world. And then came the moment that changed everything. Captain DeJoe took a fleet deep into Talvor space and appeared above their home world in attack on a civilian population. One of the delegates exclaimed, "That's against every council law." "Yes," Vesk said. "It is, and that's exactly why it worked. Because humans knew we would be horrified. They knew the Talvor would be terrified. They appeared above a planet with 8 billion people and essentially said, 'Stop or we kill everyone here.'" "Did they mean it?" a delegate asked. Quietly, Vesk was silent for a long moment. "That's the question that still keeps me awake. I've studied the human fleet weapons loadout that day. I've analyzed their targeting systems, and I believe that if the Talvor had attacked, Captain DeJoe would have done exactly what he threatened. He would have launched everything he had at that planet." "That's monstrous," someone whispered. "Yes," Vesk agreed, "it is monstrous. It's also why the war ended. The Tower withdrew all forces. They signed a peace treaty. They haven't threatened human space since, because humans prove they were willing to become monsters to survive." He paused, letting that sink in. "But here's what really terrifies me," Vesk continued. "It happened 3 weeks after the war ended. The council held an emergency session to decide whether to sanction humanity for their actions. We invited Ambassador Hyeonsu to speak in their defense." The display showed the council chamber and a single human standing before hundreds of alien representatives. Hyeonsu spoke for 20 minutes. Vesk said he explained humanity's perspective. He talked about their history, and then he said something that I will never forget. Vesk played the recording. The human ambassador's voice filled the chamber. "We appreciate the council's understanding during this difficult time. We know our tactics were controversial. We know we pushed the boundaries of acceptable warfare, but I want to be very clear about something." The human paused, looking around the chamber. "Everything you saw during the war with the Tower was humanity holding back. We fought a limited war. We followed most of the Council's rules of engagement. We tried to minimize civilian casualties. We showed mercy when we could." Another pause. The chamber had been dead silent. "If we had truly been fighting for our survival, if Earth itself had been threatened, you would have seen something very different. You would have seen humanity without restraints, and I promise you, counselors, you don't want to see that. We don't want to see that because we terrify ourselves when we reach that point." Vesk stopped the recording. "Do you understand everything we witnessed? All that brutality and cunning and willingness to die was humanity being restrained. That was them fighting." Carefully, the young delegates looked shocked. One of them finally asked, "What did they mean? What would humanity do if they weren't holding back?" Vesk considered how to answer. "I've studied human history extensively since then. Before they met us, humans fought among themselves for thousands of years. They developed weapons so terrible that they agreed never to use them. Biological weapons that could kill millions. Nuclear weapons that could destroy entire continents. Chemical weapons that caused unimaginable suffering. But those are banned." A delegate protested. "They're banned because humans created them and then realized they'd gone too far." Vesk said they built weapons, looked at what they'd done and said, "Never again." But the weapons exist. The knowledge exists. If humanity truly faced extinction, do you think they'd hesitate to use them? He brought up Another display showing casualty figures. From human wars before the Talver invasion, in their last major conflict. On Earth, humans killed millions of their own kind. They bombed cities, they burned forests, they poisoned water supplies, and that was when they were fighting each other, when both sides were human and understood the horror of what they were doing. What are you saying? A delegate asked. I'm saying that humanity's capacity for violence, when fully unleashed, is beyond anything the Council has experienced. Most species in the galaxy fight to win territory or resources. They have limits, rules, things they won't do even in war. Vesk's fear pulsed with light, a sign of emotion in his species. Humans fight to survive, and when survival is at stake, they have no limits. They will use any weapon. They will sacrifice anything. They will become whatever they need to become, and that's what Ambassador Heinzu was telling us. That was him saying, you saw us being careful, you don't want to see us being desperate. The chamber was silent. Finally, the Krell delegate who had spoken first asked, so why do we allow them on the Council? Why do we trade with them if they're so dangerous? Vesk smiled or made the gesture his species used for approval, because they're also the only species that voluntarily limits themselves. They're the ones who said, we won't use these terrible weapons. They're the ones who showed mercy when they could have destroyed the Talver home world. They're the ones who fight fiercely but stop fighting when the enemy surrenders. He brought up a final image. It showed human medical teams helping rebuild Kepler-7, working alongside Talver volunteers, former enemies working together. Humans are dangerous, Vesk said, perhaps the most dangerous species in the galaxy, but they're also capable of incredible compassion. They help their enemies after defeating them. They share their technology. They fight fiercely to protect their people, but don't seek conquest, so we should trust them. A delegate asked. No, Vesk said firmly, we should respect them. We should understand what they are. A species that evolved fighting itself for millennia and learned to be very, very good at it. A species that can be your greatest ally or your worst enemy. A species that will do terrible things if pushed but would prefer not to. He looked at each young delegate in turn. The lesson of the human war is this: never underestimate them, never threaten them without being prepared for total war, and most importantly, never assume you understand their limits, because they've proven they're willing to go further than any species we've encountered. But they've been peaceful since the war, one delegate pointed out. Yes, Vesk agreed, because they won, because the galaxy learned to respect them, because we gave them a seat on the Council and treated them as equals. As long as we do that, as long as we don't threaten their survival, humans are wonderful partners. He paused.